Okay, let's go ahead and open up in prayer. Abba, Father, we bless you. We thank you for all of your goodness, your kindness, your mercy, and your compassion. Holy Abba, Father, there are so many things that we need from you. And one of the things that we need from you is the absence of fear. Your word says that perfect love casts out all fear. Yet too many of us, Abba, are dealing with the spirit of fear in our lives in various areas. I pray, Abba, that this message, when it goes forth, and it is received by the ears of the hearing, Abba, that something in this message by your Ruach will speak to those people, Abba, and that you will break the spirit of fear within your people, that they may be able to stand up and do exactly what it is you have called them out of this world to do. And so, Abba, we just want to bless you and thank you for your words, because they are words of encouragement. They are words for edification. They are words for building us up and equipping us to do your will, which is to preach the gospel of the kingdom of Yahweh, and that it is near to this world if they'll only reach out and accept this message, Abba. But we who are your people, of all people, are the only ones who are the ambassadors to do this job. And for that, we must, at all costs, rest in you and rest in Yahshua, and allow the spirit of fear to be eradicated from all areas of our life. Let this message go forth today, Abba, and let it be for edification, for the building up of the saints, Abba, for helping them and equipping them to do the work that you have called them to do. In Yahshua's mighty name, amen. So today's message is going to be a little bit misleading, because I'll get into that in a minute, but the message today is called, do you have power over serpents and scorpions, or do you hibernate? Do you have power over serpents and scorpions, or do you hibernate? Now, there are two aspects to this message today. The primary one is the one that's not going to be self-evident based upon this title. But yet that is the one that I really kind of want to more focus on, because that's the one that is the genesis and the inspiration of this message. Let me elaborate. In the last few years, I've been seeing a phenomena in the body of Messiah. And that phenomena is one where people are operating in the spirit of fear, and very specifically, this kind of fear that I want to talk about. And this kind of fear is the fear of society. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is that we have a segment of the body of Messiah who relishes the idea of getting away from the cities, even getting away from America, and moving to little countries and moving way out into the woods somewhere, so far away from society that they can live this utopian life. My question is, did Yahshua call you out of this world to do that? My question also is, can you see the conflict between that ideology and what Yahshua actually taught us to do? And we'll get into that in some different areas. So let's go ahead and let's get started in the book of Ezekiel in chapter 2. We're going to start in Ezekiel chapter 2. And the point of this particular set of texts that we're going to get into is that there is no reason to have fear. There really is no reason to have fear. And the only reason why you would have fear is because you're not hearing from Yahweh what he's trying to tell you. All prophets heard from Yahweh, and they were all given mandates and things to do as his ambassadors on this earth. So let's start reading in verse 1. And he said to me, Son of man, stand on your feet, and I will speak to you. Then the Spirit, the Ruach, entered me when he spoke to me, and set me on my feet, and I heard him who spoke to me. And he said to me, Son of man, I am sending you to the children, which is Bane in the Hebrew, which is those who are the builders of the family name, which is Yahweh, is the builder of that name, of Israel, which means Yisrael, who will rule as Elohim. So in order for Israel to rule as Elohim on the earth, which is what the prophecies teach us, of which we are a part of, then you must be building his name. That's what qualifies you to be in that group. To a rebellious nation, which is interesting because that word nation is goy. And goy means Gentile. So basically he's classifying Israel as behaving as a Gentile nation. So this is the mandate for Ezekiel, is to go and speak to a nation of people who are my people Israel, but they're really living as Gentiles, goyim. And we have that phenomena in the body of Messiah today. We have a lot of people running around claiming Yeshua, Yahushua, however you want to say it, but they're really living more as the mentality of a goyim. Now, it's not my intent here to judge anybody. It's not my intent to demeanor anybody. It's not my intent to condemn anybody. This message is for you and you alone, to judge between you and the Father where you fit in this in all areas of your life. I'm not qualified to do that for you unless he gives me a specific word. So here, this people is a rebellious people acting like Gentiles, and he has a mandate to go and he needs to speak to them. That has rebelled against me, and their fathers have transgressed, which is Pasha, who broke away from just authority. That's what that word means. So this is a people who were once believers, once followed the commandments and followed the Torah and the priestly way and the Mosaic way, and they left from that just authority onto their own against me to this very day. Verse 4. For they are impotent, which means cruel and hard-hearted. Cruel and hard-hearted. I want you to pay attention to some of the adjectives that Yahweh uses throughout this study today, because it's going to mean something more as we get to the end. And stubborn children, I'm sending you to them, and you shall say to them, thus says Yahweh Elohim. As for them, whether they hear, Shema, we've brought this word up before, and the word Shema means to hear with intelligence. It's not a casual hearing. This is a hearing where the Ruach is speaking to the inside of you, and you know it's convicting you. You just know that you are guilty as can be. And so that is with intelligence. The question is then, what do you do with that once you've been convicted? Do you brush it aside, say, I'm going to continue on doing what I'm doing? Or are you going to make the necessary changes? Because if you don't make the changes, the hammer is going to come down on you. Make no mistake about it. It will at some point. So let's move on. Verse 5. As for them, whether they hear, Shema, hearing with intelligence, or whether they refuse, which is kadal, and that means, and to stay flabby and idle. Flabby and idle. So, I mean, Yahweh's not mincing his words here. You're either hearing, and you're understanding, and you're doing something with that understanding, or you're the opposite. You're flabby and idle. That's like that's like being a couch potato, as we use in this culture. All you do is sit on the couch all day, eating potato chips, drinking soda, and watching TV. If that's where you want to go, spiritually speaking, that's up to you. But this is his words, and this is how he characterizes this state of mind that they're in. For they are rebellious, Marie, which means full of bitterness. How many people do you see that are full of bitterness and they can't function in the body aside because they have not yet come to deal with their bitterness? And so this is a bitter house, and yet they will know. And that word know is yada in the Hebrew, and that means to acknowledge. Okay, so what he's saying is they'll hear or they may not hear. In other words, they'll listen or they may not listen, but no matter which way it is, they're still going to know enough that they will acknowledge what? That a prophet has been amongst them. They ain't going to escape that. They're going to know when somebody comes in the power and the might of Yahweh and speaks the word. You can buck, you can fight, you can resist, you can rebel, you can do whatever you want to do, but even if you walk away with that, you're still going to know a prophet was amongst you. And you will have to live with that. Because that prophet's main job is not to call fire down from heaven. His main job is to instruct Israel, get back to the just authority of the Torah. That's his job. Verse 6, and you, son of man, do not be afraid of them. Here we go, that fear. Don't be afraid. Now he's outnumbered. It's just him against the house of Israel, who are basically a bunch of Gentiles. Okay? So in the natural, it would appear that it would be natural to be fearful. But Yahweh's admonishing him, don't rely on them, rely on me. Nor be afraid of their words, though briars, karab, which is a stinging thistle. So apparently this kind of a thistle is when you get poked, it must have some kind of sap or something in it that causes a stinging reaction inside you. So it's not just a poke, but it leaves something underneath your skin that is an irritation. It doesn't go away. And there are many people in the body of Messiah who are like stinging thistles. They just constantly got this thing inside them that they're injecting you with venom, and they don't go away. And they constantly want to torment you all the time. So he's warning them about the nature of this people. And thorns are with you, and you dwell among scorpions, which is a krab, which is a scourging, knotting whip. A scourging, knotting whip is how he characterizes the scorpion. Do not be afraid of their words, or dismayed, shataf, nor prostrate through confusion and fear. So what he's saying is, they're going to come at you. And they're going to come at you with words. And those words are going to be very damaging. They're going to be very hurtful. They're going to be very slanderous. Don't give any credibility to them whatsoever. Because the moment that you give any credence and credibility to them, this fear is going to come in. And then you're going to start compromising. And then you're going to be in a worse position that they'll be in. Ultimately, that's how that works. So moving on, it says, nor prostrate through confusion and fear by their looks, though they are a rebellious, full of bitterness house. Verse 7, you shall speak my words to them, whether they hear, shema, hear with intelligence, or whether they refuse and stay flabby and idle, for they are a rebellious house. So it doesn't make any difference. That's not a very promising mandate from Yahweh, to have to go to a people that may decide that they're going to try to do damage to you, and they're not going to repent. But yet that his word to them is not contingent upon whether or not they will listen or whether they will not. Verse 8, but you, son of man, hear what I say to you. Do not be a rebellious like that rebellious house. Open your mouth and eat what I give you. Now, the lesson in this is this. There are many, but I want to hone in on this. The only way that Ezekiel was not going to be fearful is if he hears what Yahweh says and what the masses are saying, that he should not be listening to them. So you can't serve two masters. You're either going to hear one or you're going to hear the other. So our job, our mandate, is not hear the foolishness of these other people, but to listen what Yahweh is telling you. And you better doggone be sure it's Yahweh's voice. And that it's not your voice mixed with Yahweh's voice. And that it's not your voice exclusively. And that it's not Satan's voice. And that it's not Satan's voice mixed with your voice. So there's a lot of combinations there. You need to know how to hear. And then you need to know how to test the spirits, so that you're very, very clear about whose voice you're hearing and what your mandate is. So, I want to go back to this title about having power over serpents and scorpions. When we look in Luke chapter 9, before I even go there, when you go on later into, I think it's Ezekiel chapter 4, what does Yahweh say to Ezekiel? He says, I know you live amongst serpents and scorpions. Therefore, I will give you a forehead as hard as a diamond. So, in other words, what that means, it's going to be a stubbornness. It's going to be the kind of stubbornness that Yahweh has that supersedes the stubbornness of the Israelites. Their stubbornness is a fleshly stubbornness. This stubbornness that the forehead of Ezekiel is going to get, which is hard as a diamond, you can't penetrate that diamond. And so ultimately he will win, they will lose if they don't conform. Ask Yahweh to give you the same kind of stubbornness for the right reasons, in your forehead, so that nobody can penetrate you and instill the spirit of fear inside of you that makes you want to draw back and go hibernate out in the woods somewhere. This is a bad scenario we have in the body of Messiah. People want to go build a country house out in the country and get away from society. Is that what Yahweh called us to do? I think not. I think if you look at all the gospel accounts, Yahshua went out every single day into the cities and confronted his enemies, confronted the masses who had needs. They had illnesses, they had hunger, they had demon possession, they had all these things. If you go live out in the country or go move to some other little country somewhere where there's no believers, or out in the country where there's no believers and you're many, many miles away from a community, how in the world are you going to be a witness? You're just trying to save your own keister is what you're trying to do. Now, where I came from many years ago, we had that same kind of philosophy in this way. We were looking forward to prophecy being fulfilled so we could get our keisters out of this world and go to the place of safety. The difference is we weren't trying to get out of this world ourselves to go save our rear ends. We were preaching the word. We were publishing things. We were out there witnessing to people out in these cities where it's dangerous. We weren't hiding out in the country somewhere and trying to escape, because really deep down inside, if you're honest with yourself, I'm not necessarily talking about anybody here, but if you're honest with yourself, the reason why you're running out to the country is because you don't want to do the Father's will. You want to live this nice house on the prairie type of fantasy life. That's what believers want to do. This is becoming chronic. We got people leaving the country, going to little countries, they're all by themselves, and now they're complaining that they sold all their possessions to go there, that they got nobody to fellowship with. Well, gee, why did it have to take you that long? Did Yahweh tell you to sell your possessions and go move to another country? Seriously? Whose voice were you listening to? This is a pandemic in the body of Messiah. This week I heard more and I had to correct a person. I had to say, I'm sorry, I beg to differ with you. Your job is to stay in the city and be a witness to Messiah. If you go live way out in that country, how are you going to do that? There's nobody around. You're going to preach to the birds, the squirrels, the raccoons? Is that the extent? You're going to convert them to the Messiah? Come on now, can we get serious and think about this thing? It's really rooted in fear. And it's not just fear, it's this pull of the world that you want to have this nice little house, like the prairie on the house, on the hill, surrounded by the woods, and you got your animals, you got a little farm life going, you got your agriculture, it's very holistic. That's a spirit in itself, if you're not careful, that can lure you into a lifestyle that takes you away from the Father's will. You could have done that without Him calling you into the body of Messiah. This is where I'm getting to with this. This bothers me. Because I had to reprimand a person this week politely. Sorry, you're wrong. Your motives are in the wrong direction. You'll never accomplish the Father's will living out in the woods somewhere. I'll be the first to say, I'm a private person. I don't like nobody to bother me. I like to be left alone. I have to get out of that skin to come here every Sabbath and be amongst people that, for the most part, I'd be more happy sitting by the lake at my house, all by myself, praying, meditating, studying all day long. Leave me the hell alone. That's my nature. That's my passion. That's my desire. But instead I say, I crucify that willingly, knowing that that's a crutch, a weakness of my flesh that does not serve Yahweh. It's self-indulgence. That's another one. This whole thing is based on self-indulgence. I'm going to fill my life with all these pleasurable physical things because I got a void going on in my life that is driving me nuts, and I got to get out there and I got to do all this kind of stuff because I'm miserable. I'm a miserable person. And yet, that's why we were redeemed from this world. So that you can be shown how miserable you really are, because the kingdom of Yahweh is so close now that if you can enter into that, you exchange those values for His values. You two are not compatible. You can't go to some little island in the Caribbean and live by yourself and grow your vegetables and there's nobody around you to talk to. What are you doing? I guarantee you, as Yahweh sits on His throne, you did not hear His voice to go there. You did not. You're listening to your own passion, your own desires, and your own escapism. There's too many of us in the body of Messiah, and we're going to get into this a little bit, that are trying to escape the will of the Father. And it's wrong. At the end of the day, it's your call. It's not my call, you know. I hope I don't slip into something like that. I'm at least, for me, I'm aware and I'm honest with my shortcomings and what things I would like to do. And when things of Yahweh get in my way and of me doing the things I want to do, I get a little perturbed initially. I'll be honest. And I might buck and fight for maybe about 30 seconds. I said, is your will not my will? Okay. You're going to rain on my parade. I had this all planned out. I thought I was going to have a good time. You don't want me to have a good time? I'm going to have a good time in your way. Are you willing to do that? A lot of us are still not willing to do that. And I'm not sitting here saying I do it every single time. I try to, and I know that I'm going to get my can kicked up and down the street if I don't do it. And I get tired of getting my can kicked. It's a whole lot easier if we just listen to Yahweh and don't allow this fear to get into our lives that makes us want to go hibernate somewhere. Now, you can be in the city and you're still in hibernation based on fear. You won't come out of your house. You won't go mix with nobody. You won't preach the word of Yahweh or be an example to anybody. So, you can take the man out of the island, but you can't take the island out of the man, as the old saying goes. So there's a paradigm shift there. So this is not just about moving to another country or to an island and moving out into the woods somewhere. You can be in the city and have that same characteristic as that person who lives on a Caribbean island somewhere all by themselves. The only one that I know of that was supposed to do that was John, who was put on the island of Patmos. And I guarantee you that was no picnic. There was no picnic, especially with the things that Yahshua showed him in the visions in the book of Revelation. So let's go to Luke chapter 9, and we're going to kind of go through a preliminary here and then into chapter 10. So this kind of sets the stage, so it kind of makes a little bit more sense. And this is about doing His will. If you just do His will, you'll find that over a period of time, that natural fear that we carnal human beings have, even though we're believers in Messiah, will begin to wane and begin to go away little by little if you just get with the plan and stop doing your own plan. That's what it comes down to. So in verse 60 it says, in Luke 9, Yahshua said to him, let the dead bury with its rituals their own dead. But you go and preach the kingdom of royal rule of Yahweh. This is what the world doesn't understand. There's a kingdom that is already kind of here, getting ready to take over. It's doing a coup de grace. Right now, it's trying to get a bunch of disciples and proselytes to come into that kingdom, get trained so they can go out and liberate more people. And then it comes to a point where that army has risen up and it's gotten so big, the Hasatan's ticked off, and now he's going to rebel, and there's going to be a doggone war going on. And he's going to get kicked out of heaven, thrown back down to the earth. He's going to chase the bride into the place of safety, and then all hell breaks loose. Thankfully, it only lasts 3.5 years, approximately, plus 45 days. And then after that, he goes into his prison for 1,000 years. Let's move on, verse 61. And another also said, Master, I will follow you. But let me first go and bid them farewell who are at my house. Verse 62, but Yahshua said to them, no one having put as to throw his hand to the plow. In other words, in the Greek it means to throw it with force. In other words, you see what it is, you know what it is, and yeah, I want that. And he grabs it with force, with enthusiasm, okay? And looking back is fit or appropriate for the kingdom of Yahweh. So, if you grab a hold of the plow, and you're here because you did grab a hold of the plow, because you got baptized, and you said, I do, but now you want to be a rebellious wife, and you want to follow your own passion and lust and do your own thing, then you're in a heap of trouble. And it's saying here that you're not fit or appropriate for the kingdom of Yahweh. You're actually in the process of being ejected out of the body of Messiah. The moment you entertain that state of mind, you are now in the process of being ejected out of the kingdom of Yahweh. Just like Hasatan has been ruling this earth now for some 6,000 years. He's been here longer than that, but he's been ruling mankind for some 6,000 years. He's in the process of being ejected out of his own kingdom. It's been a 6,000-year process. When it's all done, it would have been a 7,000-year process. There are legal prerequisites that has to take place in order for Yahweh to fully evict him out and sentence him to death. It takes 7,000 years to do that. So, as in the body of Messiah, when we start going down this road of fear and we're not listening to Yahweh and we don't want to do our own thing, then what happens is you then begin yourself on the road of ejecting yourself out of the body of Messiah. It doesn't happen in one day. I don't think I've ever seen it happen to anybody in one day. It's a process. Some people it could take weeks, and even then that doesn't really take weeks. It could be months, it could be years, and all of a sudden they're gone. Wow. Never saw what was going on in that person's life, because they've been getting cooked little by little every day, and they've been keeping their mouth shut. Let's move on. Now we're going to verse 1 of chapter 10. So here's where we start getting into Yahshua talking about having power over serpents and scorpions. This is the same issue that Ezekiel was having. So in verse 1 it says, after these things the master appointed 70 others also, and sent as set apart for a mission them 2 by 2 before his face into every city. And that word city is polis in the Greek, and it means with walls of all sizes. So these are fortified cities that have walls around them. Not just anybody gets into these cities. Okay? These are protected cities. And place where he himself would also go. So it's kind of like he sent ambassadors out ahead of him to prepare the way before he goes into these places. Like John the Baptist did, preparing the way of Yahweh. Verse 2, then he said, in a systematic discourse to them. So in other words, he has a very structured set of how he's explaining these things. That's what it's saying in the Greek. To them, the harvest of reaping the crop is truly great, but the laborers who toil to teach, get that, the laborers who toil to teach. There aren't many teachers in the Hebraic roots of the body of Messiah. At least not people that really know what they're talking about. I'll say that. They've got a lot of tradition and a lot of Christianity mixed into the Hebraic roots now. So you got a lot of teachers mixing a lot of stuff which is not kosher. So, but the point here is that the point of this is that he's looking for laborers who are able to teach. We should be able to rightly divide the word of truth, at least in a very basic kind of way, which then begins to qualify you to teach. There are other ways to teach. It's not just about opening up the scripture and doing like what I'm doing here. There's teaching by example. You know, Donna was saying that it's hard for me to listen to my husband, but I'm learning to try to trust that he's not meaning something bad on me. He's doing it because he's trying to protect me. I may not fully understand that right now, but that's his motive. And that's what you got to work with. You got to look at a person's motive. Why are they doing and saying what they're saying? And if you can truly believe that this person would never do anything to intentionally hurt me, then that fear is unfounded if you respond in a wrong way. That's the point. Anyway, I got off subject. Are few, therefore pray as begging and binding yourself to the master of the harvest to send out by driving them out as laborers who toil to teach into his harvest. So for those of us who maybe are not exactly called to teach maybe in the same way that I am, your job in part, amongst many other things, is to pray because you've joined yourself to the Messiah. Pray that he will send out and dispatch more teachers, especially to overcome all the ones that are teaching a lot of false nonsense. Verse 3, go your way as to lead yourself. Behold, I send you out as lambs that are male lambs among the wolves. So he's sending us out as male lambs because Yahshua is a male lamb. He was slain from the foundation of the world. We're going as representations of lamb just like him. And so you have to be willing to allow yourself to get afflicted. That's where that fear comes in. If you can't get rid of that, you're never going to allow yourself to come out of the country house that you're so living in, or in the Caribbean island, or wherever other place you've gone to, and come back into the real world. That's the fantasy world. Then there's too many in the body of Messiah that want to live in the fantasy world. Somehow they justified in their mind that their minds that they can live in this fantasy world and still be doing the will of the Father by preaching the kingdom of Yahweh to the squirrels and the raccoons in the woods. It doesn't work. Now, there may be some that maybe have a web ministry where they can live in the country. And their web ministry is more based upon pulling people together or helping unfortunate people or making connections or who knows what, okay? I'm not talking about that stuff. I'm talking about the people that are saying, I'm going to live out in the country or on this Caribbean island and I'm just going to pray to Yahweh and pray to Yahshua and I'm going to study the Bible and I'm going to grow in grace and knowledge and all that, but I have no community and I'm not witnessing to anybody. Then you know what you are? You're a wicked and lazy servant, as Yahshua said. He says, because to that man he gave 1 talent. And he buried that talent in the ground. He did nothing with that talent. And he came back to collect. And he said, you are a lazy and wicked servant, worthy to be burned. At least if you would have put that in the bank, I could have got some interest out of it. But you did nothing with the talent that I gave you. The level of faith that I measure to every man, you did nothing with it. We can't be doing that. And fear will paralyze you to the point where you bury that talent in the ground. And that's what these people are doing with this hibernation mentality. Hiding from the world. Running from the world. Now, the only exception to that is Yahshua says that you're to go into every city of Israel, and you still won't get through all the cities before the word of Yahweh has been preached. And if they persecute you in one city, then you go to another. He didn't say run out into the country and build yourself a farmhouse and live with your goats and your sheep and your cows and your chickens and all that kind of stuff. No, what do? You go to the next city and you speak the same thing, and they're going to kick your keister out of that city too. And then they're going to chase you to the next city. And then you're going to say it again. We got to get out of this hibernation mentality that breeds this kind of fear. Get honest with yourself. What is really scaring the living daylights out of you? What is scaring you? That we all have to answer for ourselves. Verse 4, carry neither money bag, knapsack, which is a leather pouch for food, nor sandals, and greet as to embrace and take leave with no one along the road. So what he's saying is, in the regular translation it says don't greet anybody, but that's not what it really means in the Greek. What it means is you could greet somebody who you pass on the road, but what he's saying in the Greek, it means to the point where they lure you away from your responsibility. Like the prophet who met the other false prophet, and he convinced him not to do what he was going to do. And he got in trouble. That's the precept or the concept is, yeah, you greet, because maybe you can preach to that person and they'll receive Yahshua. But this is just talking about Don't greet a person who's going to lead you away from your mandate. That's the point. Verse 5. But whatever house you enter, first say, peace and prosperity to this house. Verse 6. And if a son of peace, in other words, a believer, and prosperity is there, your peace will rest on it. If not, it will return to you. And remain in the same house, eating and drinking such things as they give. For the laborer who toiled to teach is worthy as to draw praise of his wages for services rendered. This is another problem in the body of Messiah. People want to eat the word of Yahweh, but they don't want to pay for it. This is a big problem. That's called greed. It's the spirit of greed. I want something for nothing. Pure and simple. It's a spirit of greed. That is an unclean spirit. And that is rampant in the body of Messiah. Everybody wants somebody to spend time putting messages together, DVDs, videos, whatever, books, whatever they do out there, but they don't want to pay for it. But they want to sit in there and they want to enjoy what the person has put the labor in to do. Even Yahshua says, don't muzzle the ox while he treads out the grain. Let the poor thing eat. So if he stops for a minute on the side and he wants to grab a few pieces of grass and chew on it while he continues walking, doggone it, if you can do that for an ox, why can't we do it in the body of Messiah? Because we're stingy. That's why. We're stingy. We want to spend our labors on ourselves. We're just innately stingy. Shame on you if that's the category you're in. What are you scared of? Are you scared that you're actually going to maybe get a harvest? That one day maybe Yahweh might dump something on your doorstep that puts you into a situation where your life is a lot more comfortable than it's ever been? Are you scared of that? Are you scared to see what Yahweh's going to do for you? Because remember what we read a few weeks ago in Malachi where Yahweh says, if you will not put the tithes and the offerings, I cannot rebuke Hasatan from you, because he will devour everything that you try to build in your life. You are not giving me permission because you're stingy. You're stealing. Does that mean you're not going to the kingdom? I'm not saying that. All I'm simply saying is these are different things that breed fear. And I really want to kind of stay back on this main focus about this hibernation thing, because even that is a form of hibernation. You could be in the city, but you're still scared to death because you won't take Yahweh at his word if you will test me in some of these things. Listen, it's not easy. I get it. It's not easy. Nobody's going to come to all these understandings and compliance in this lifetime. It's about a progression. It's about building one foundation of knowledge upon another. But as you're convicted, for crying out loud, can we stop with the games and stick with your conviction of what you've been convicted of in your conscience and follow through and leave that childish nonsense behind? At what point do we stop that? And that's for each of us to try to figure out for ourselves. What makes me do what I do? And one of the things that I do for me is I say to myself, what do I believe? Why do I believe it? And how did I first come to accept that? If you will ask yourself those three questions, if you can get rid of that fear for a moment, if you can ask yourself those three questions, that, if you're going to be honest with yourself, it will lead you to an answer. But if you're scared of what that answer is, you won't ask yourself those three questions. So you're going to stay just where you are. You're not going to go anywhere. Nothing's going to change. You continue to get what you've always got, as the saying goes. Do not go from house to house. Verse 8, whatever city with walls of all sizes you enter, and they receive you, eat such things as are set before you. Verse 9, and heal the sick. And this word in the Greek is asthenes, which means both physical physical sickness and those who are without strength. In other words, those who maybe are weak in the faith. They're dealing with a lot of oppressions and strongholds in their life. They come from a very rough background, maybe alcoholism, things like that, and they're having a hard time getting past that. So that's what it's talking about. There, and say to them, the kingdom of Yahweh has come near to you. In other words, it's available now. Before this, it wasn't available, but now it's available. You can enter into this kingdom, and you don't have to be under the death sentence that humanity is under anymore. You can be free from all that stuff. Verse 10, but whatever city you enter, and they do not receive you, go out into its streets, that is the open square. The word streets means an open square. Every one of these cities has an open square. When I go to Colombia with my wife, it's funny because every city pretty much we go to, there's an open square. It's like a square. It's got a park in the middle, and it's surrounded by, a squareness of little stores and things like that. And it seems like that's where the town likes to come and congregate and socialize. It's a beautiful thing to see that. People sitting under the trees and playing games and talking and stuff like that. So this is what that word streets means in the Greek. It actually means the square of the city, the center of the city. And say, the very dust that is blown about of your city, which clings like sticky glue to us, we wipe or scrape it off against you. In other words, the crud of your city is not going to stick to me. It can't stick to me. It's going to fall right back to where it came from. And it says, off against you. Nevertheless, know this, that the kingdom of Yahweh has come near to you. You have been witnessed to. You have no excuse. You have received the word. If you've rejected it, then the Shalom peace is withdrawn from you, and your cruddy dirt from your city goes back on you. From dust you came, dust you go back to. In other words, it's a form of condemnation, in essence. You're rejecting the king. Do you know what kind of lack of fear you got to have to go do this kind of stuff? If you remember the part where Shaul, I forget who the other one was, went with him, preaching the word in the city, in the streets, and they got beat up, taken captive, by the I think it was the Romans, and beat them up, put them in jail, and then they were scolded and told not to go back on preaching that name anymore. They let him out of jail the same day, being beaten up, bleeding, bruised, probably limping and stuff. They went right back to that city, street, right back out there. They did it all over again. It's like they're telling them, to hell with you. I serve the master. If it's my time to die, I'm going to die. You can't have fear to do that. You can't live in a prairie house out in the country to do that kind of stuff, withdrawn from society. You can't live on a Caribbean island by yourself and do that. Now, if you're going to the locals, and you could speak their language, then okay. I say, oh, fine. If Yahweh told you to go there and do that, fine. But I'm hearing of people that don't talk to nobody. They just scared to death. I remember a story a few years ago that people left the area because they heard a tsunami was coming. They sold their businesses, sold their house, all that stuff to move to Missouri or whatever it was, and they went there and they went bankrupt. Did Yahweh tell you to do that? For crying out loud. Heck no, he didn't tell you to do that. Because he says, I don't mean you harm. But you're now broke. You're bankrupt. Your life has to be completely redefined. And they came all the way back here again. No tsunami. But a financial tsunami hit them. Can we see the stupidity of this? We're listening to voices that are telling us stuff that is a bunch of junk. And we're buying it hook, line, and sinker. This fear is crippling us. And it's making us do things that are innately stupid. It's a shame. I'm calling this out because I ain't hearing nobody talking about this new wave that's going through the body of Messiah. Hibernation. Running from the real world. I'll get into that at the very end. Okay, verse 13. Woe, what grief it will be to you, Chorazin. Woe to you, Bethsaida. which it means a fishing house. For if the mighty works and miracle powers which were done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, which is along the coastline in northern Israel, they would have repented long ago, sitting in sackcloth, camel's hair worn as a sign of grief, and ashes. Now Chorazin was steeped in paganism. And they actually found there a temple that had Moses' seat in it. Remember Yahshua said, obey those who sit in Moses' seat, do what they say but not what they do? That's what he was referring to. But there are a few cities there right along the Sea of Galilee in the northern part there. Capernaum is another one, They're steeped in paganism. Let's move on. Verse 14. But it will be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon at the judgment through divine law than it is for you. Why? Because in them days they didn't have Messiah. They didn't have the signs, wonders, and miracles going on, so there was no witness to them. But when they come up in the second resurrection, which is the resurrection of the flesh, and they're judged then they're going to see the Messiah, and they're probably going to believe. So in other words, they were convicted 1,000 years from now when that second resurrection takes place, but when this is happening, they don't believe. So he's pronouncing judgment on them, just like it said about casting off the dust. Verse 15. And you, Capernaum, who are exalted to heaven, will be brought down to Hades. He who hears and you hears me. He who rejects me and he who rejects, which is to de-esteem. In other words, bring it down to a lower level. He rejects him who sent me, which is the Father. So if you reject the Son, you reject the Father. We all know that. Verse 17. Then the 70 returned with joy, saying, Master, even the demons are subject as in subordination to us in your name, which is Yahweh, that has authority. And he said to them, I saw as a spectator Hasatan fall like lightning from heaven from the abode of Yahweh. Behold, I give you authority, which is privileged and superhuman capacity, to trample underfoot on serpents. That is an artful, malicious person. Here we go. We're not talking about demons now. We're talking about serpents and scorpions as humans who have certain characteristics. That's what he's talking about. You don't need to fear these people. These people are being ruled by Hasatan, who are calling on Yahshua and Yahweh. But they're being ruled by the enemy, and their job is to inflict venom into you and make you as bad off as they are. They're under judgment. That's when it's important to know who you are in Messiah. If you don't know who you are in Messiah, they're going to sweep you up real quick. This is why it's so important that the body of Messiah gets fully equipped with not only the understanding, but gets equipped with the dunamis power of Yahweh, that demons are in subjection to you, because it's the demons that are influencing these other people to behave towards you the way that they do. They're put there for a reason. They're in your life for a reason, which is to provoke you one way or the other. Come with us, be like us, or you stand up to them and you let them know who they are, and that you're not getting this hombre. And scorpions, who pierces with its stinging, and over all the power of the enemy, that are actively hateful and hostile, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. They can't do anything to you. Man, I've had lots of them come at me. Lots of them. I was surrounded in one situation by about 25 of them, and they were ready to jump me in a congregation and beat the living daylights out of me. Yahweh didn't allow a single one of them to touch me. I've had leaders waiting for me outside a temple to come after me and try to do me harm. They couldn't do anything. So it's what you focus on. Who are you listening to? If you're listening to the wrong crowd, you're going to get lured away. You need to hear the voice. And that voice needs to be loud and clear. And your mandate needs to be loud and clear. There should be no mistake in your mind. If you're vacillating between two opinions, you're in a state of confusion. You're in Babylonia. And if you're not hearing clearly and you're confused about what you're hearing, don't do anything, and you stand and you hold your ground until Yahweh comes, like he did with Daniel. We'll get into that when I go through Daniel, where Daniel was battling to get an interpretation of the dream, and the prince of Persia, Gabriel, was being withheld by the prince of Persia, which was a demon, for 22 days because he couldn't deliver the message to Daniel. So Daniel kept praying and fasting until Michael the angel came to intercede and hold off the prince of Persia along with 3 other princes so that Gabriel could come through and give the interpretation. This is demonic warfare we're dealing with, you know. It's demonic warfare. We might see it as something just natural. You're dealing with another person. But that person who's doing those hurtful things against you, that person's got an unclean spirit that's working with him. They need to be delivered. Nevertheless, do not rejoice in this. So he's saying don't rejoice in the fact that demons are in subordination to you. That's not your focus. That's what people like to gloat in, but he's saying that's not what you should be focusing on. Don't rejoice in this, that the spirits are subject as in subordination to you, but rather rejoice because your names are written and engraved in heaven. And basically that means in the book of life. Verse 21, and in that hour Yahshua rejoiced in the Spirit and said, I thank you, Father, Master of heaven and earth, that you have hidden, concealed to keep this secret, these things from the wise and prudent, and revealed them to babes. Now get this, in the Greek the word babes is nepios, which means who are simple-minded and not yet mature. Simple-minded and not yet mature. He's given them this kind of authority. We don't see that even with the mature hardly in the body of Messiah today. And yet he's given this to babes. People are immature. Wow. So we're missing some stuff. Even so, Father, for so it seemed good in your sight. All these things have been delivered and entrusted to me by my Father, and no one knows who the Son is except the Father, and who the Father is except the Son, and the one to whom the Son wills to reveal him. Messiah is the one that's got to reveal him. You have to be introduced to the Father. Just because you come to Yahshua and accept him as your Messiah doesn't mean you have a direct open door immediately to the Father. Because in that moment, you're mostly being qualified to see if you're even on the servant level. Then you go from the servant level to being a friend of Messiah. Now, when you get to the level of friend, he doesn't consider you a servant anymore. Now you're his friend. Because you won't withhold from him anything anymore. You won't be stingy anymore. You'll give him whatever he's asking of you. If he tells you to give up such and such, you give it up. And you don't fight and buck and argue about it. And say, oh, well, I worked hard for this. You can take that and put it where the sun don't shine. And then, when you become the friend, he introduces you to the Father. Now you get to talk one-on-one with the Father. Until then, it don't happen. Okay. Then, in verse 23, he turned around to his disciples and said privately, blessed, who are supremely well off, are the eyes which see the things that you see. For I tell you that many prophets and kings have desired to see what you see and have not seen it, and do hear what you hear and have not heard it. Verse 25, and behold, a certain lawyer. Now, here's the thing. Yahshua just got done talking about this whole concept of serpents and scorpions. And he just got done talking about not having the fear and listening to what these people can kind of say. So what do you think is going to happen? When you get boastful and you think you're strong one particular day and you start running your mouth, Yahweh's blessed me in this and I can do this now and I can do that and whatever it is you're saying, you can take your sweet rear end to the bank. The devil's listening to that. And he's going to come and he's going to confront you with a situation or somebody to test you to see whether or not you really believe the garbage you just came out of your mouth. Now we're going to have a confrontation. And all of a sudden you're up in arms like, oh, what just happened? Next thing you know, you're in the flesh. What happened to that boastful talking? This is what's happening to Yahshua. Out of his mouth he says this stuff, the devil brings him somebody. So here we go. And behold, a certain lawyer who is an expert in Mosaic law stood up and tested thoroughly of him, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit life? This is a trick question. He said to him, what is written in the law of Moses? What is your reading or your understanding of it? So it's typical of Yahshua, he answers a question by asking a question. So it's rhetorical. So the lawyer answered and said, you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, you have answered rightly. Do this, and you will live. Then Yahshua answered and said, verse 29, but he wanting to justify himself, in other words, kind of prop himself up as if like he's somebody of great importance, and said to Yahshua, who is my neighbor? In other words, now I'm going to come back at you, and I want you to give me an answer. Let's see where this thing goes. Let's see who can outwit the other person in this test, in other words. Then Yahshua answered and said, a certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, fell among surrounding thieves, who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. This is a bad situation to be in. You're in your birthday suit, and you're beaten up, and you're half dead, and you're laying out there on this trail, this highway here, so to speak. Verse 31, now by chance a certain priest. Now this certain priest in the Greek is hieros, and it means that was a high priest. It's not just a regular priest from the temple, but this one was a Kohen HaGadol. It's a high priest, okay? Came down that road. When he saw him, he passed by on the other side. In other words, he gave him a big girth. I ain't touching that. Why? Because traditional Judaism would tell that he's not allowed to get involved in that situation. That's not Torah, but that's tradition. That's what they were going by. Okay, verse 32. Likewise, a Levite who is a lower class of priests, from the Levites, not from Aaron, when he arrived at the place and came and looked, passed by on the other side also. See, as a priest, I can't defile myself with this person. I'm too dignified. I'm too holy. I'm too set apart to help this other dying human being out in the middle of nowhere. So he too succumbed to the same philosophy. 33. But a certain Samaritan, which some of them were a mixture of Jews and Gentiles, who had kind of a little bit of a differing belief system than those in Jerusalem, as he journeyed, came where he was. And when he saw him, he had compassion. And this word compassion in the Greek means where his bowels yearned. You ever see somebody that, like, maybe seen a car accident and somebody's bleeding and they're unconscious or something like that, and you just feel this terrible feeling in your lower regions of your stomach, and you're hurting for what this person's going through, and you're hoping that they're not dead and that Yahweh will heal them and give them a recovery. That's what it's trying to get across in the Greek. Verse 34. So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring an oil, which is olive oil, and wine, that he set him on his own animal. So apparently he had a donkey or a horse or something, and he put the man who's hurt on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and that word inn is a public lounging place, and took care of him. So obviously this man, who's non-religious the way the priests are, had more compassion than the priest. The priest didn't have any compassion at all. On the next day, when he departed, he took out 2 denarii. Now, the denarii, basically, if you were to put it in a modern language today, is the equivalent of a daily wage, which for the average person is about $70-something, maybe $100, somewhere in that range. So he took out, let's say, basically about $200 of his personal money. gave them to the innkeeper, who was the warden of the caravanserai. Caravanserai is a caravan of animals that's led by the leader or the owner of those animals. A lot of this is trade routes also. That's why these robbers are there, seeing who they can steal from. And said to him, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, then I will come. When I come again, I'll pay you. So he's telling him, if this incurs more expense, I will compensate you when I come back around the other way. So clearly he probably was a merchant if he was going down this way. So which of these three do you think was the neighbor to him who fell among the thieves? So the lawyer said, he who showed mercy on him. Then Yahshua said to him, go and do likewise. So Yahshua got the last laugh, so to speak, and this man had nothing rhetorical that he could bring back. So, in conclusion, I want to ask a few questions. And it goes something like this. What if Yahshua and the disciples decided to go out to the country, say to the north of Israel, where it's very beautiful, and built a country house, farm, and lived on their days out, growing fruits and vegetables and such? What if they did that instead of going into Jerusalem, where all the heat was, and preaching the gospel of the kingdom of Yahweh? If we're his disciples, and we were discipled by him, and that's what he did, then we should all go out to the country and build ourselves a country house and live that way, away from society. But that's not what he did. So are you following a different Messiah and a different gospel? Sadly, there's been some in our group who believe they should go live out in the Negev desert. And some of them believe that their job is to gather up the Jews here, put them on ships, and bring them back to the land. Now, I don't see that anywhere in the Gospels. And it's a misunderstanding of prophecy as to when the Jews are to go back to the land, as well as the rest of Israel. That's really a different discussion. But they really believe that's their mandate, to do that. And I asked the person, I said, let's say you grabbed one Jewish family who doesn't believe in Yahshua, and somehow you were able to get them out of this country and send them back to Israel. How do you know that you're not sending him and his family back to their death? That person shrugged their shoulders and said, I don't know that. You're not hearing from Yahweh. There's something going on inside you that's not right, and you're not being honest with yourself. That's for that person to work out. I'm not condemning them. I'm just saying that's a different gospel. We were not called to that kind of a gospel. And if you understand prophecy correctly, you wouldn't be doing that in the first place. But we got false teachers out there teaching wrong prophecies on these things, and so people get caught up in this kind of stuff. And it might sound noble, but I'll tell you what, I wouldn't, without hearing Yahweh's voice, I wouldn't want to take a Jewish family, send them back to the land, and then get word that they got killed by their enemies. I would have to live through that with the rest of my life, and I will have to answer it when I stand in front of the judgment seat. And Yahweh's bigger statement is going to be, they'll come up in the resurrection, I'll deal with them at that time, but right now, you disobeyed me. I didn't tell you to do that. Who told you? Whose voice were you listening to when you did that? And that's going to hurt you in the kingdom. What if we all in the body of Messiah decided to go our own separate ways and live out of the cities alone? What would happen then? Who's going to get witnessed to? Who's going to be mentored? Who's going to have hands laid on them? Who's going to be healed? Who's going to have demons cast out of them? Who's going to teach them? You're out in the country living the good life. You're on an island enjoying the emerald or Caribbean waters, eating coconuts and stuff. Who's going to do that? Do you think you would ever have been called to the faith? Would you have had any teachers who would have been able to help you to get to where you are now if they took that position? I think not. I think not. What about those who Yahweh is calling? Would they be able to find anyone to help them if we all scattered to the hills in a state of paranoia? We got people that won't go in certain environments where there's cell phones, and they take the batteries out of them because they're scared to death that the government is going to listen to them. For crying out loud. Really? Yahshua and the disciples were out in the main streets of Jerusalem shouting out the truth of Yahweh's word to the masses in front of their enemies, the rabbis and the priests. Yahshua told them, why do you come to me with this stuff? You heard me out in the synagogues preaching the word. Why didn't you come to me then? Why do you have it against me now? I didn't speak anything into secret, yet we want to take the batteries out of our cell phones because we're afraid Uncle Sam is listening to us. The NSA is listening to us. Now, you can take this to the bank. This is on audio. When it goes on YouTube, NSA will hear the word NSA and they're going to flag me. Do I care? I don't give a damn. Because I don't fear it. Why are you fearing taking the battery out of your phone? What's going on inside of you that scares you that you can't be a witness to somebody because you won't turn on your phone? Because you're scared of the government. The only power the government has is the power that Yahweh gives them. And if Yahweh tells them to come pick me up, whether I got a battery in the phone or not, they're going to come pick me up. I can't stop that. You can't orchestrate your life. Your life doesn't belong to you. You don't have the right to take the battery out of your phone. Yahshua didn't take the battery out of his phone. He spoke it openly. The disciples spoke it openly. What kind of lifestyle are you really seeking? And does it line up with Yahshua's teaching? I would say, based upon what we talk about today, no, if that's of your philosophy. You cannot jive it with Scripture. Period. Which means you have bitten into a wrong gospel. It's a gospel of fear, a gospel of hibernation, a gospel of self-preservation, if I could use that word. You can still be in the city, but mentally be in the country. You can still be in the city, but still mentally be in the country. And that means you're not doing the Father's will. Let's conclude here with Deuteronomy chapter 8. And the purpose of the desert, which the desert is the place of trying and tribulation. This is where you qualify, you don't qualify. If you're running for the hills, you're not qualifying to be in the kingdom. Pure and simple. So in verse 11 it says, beware, shamar, by putting a hedge of protection that you do not forget, by becoming oblivious to Yahweh, your Elohim, by not keeping shamar, by putting a hedge of protection around his commandments, his judgments, which is mishpat, which is a judicial decree through divine law, and his statutes, which I command you today. Lest when you have eaten and are full, and have built beautiful houses and dwell in them, see, when you get out to the country, you can say, we made it. We have our place of safety. We are saved from society. We're not around the traffic jams. We're not around the murderings and the pillagings that go on and the drug abuse and the fights and the arguments of our neighbors and all that kind of stuff. We finally made the life. We made it. We're living the good life now. Remember Miller High Life? The old commercials from the 70s?
How about that sitcom Green Acres?
Green Acres, yeah. So, when you've gotten to that point, and you can declare this, then, and when your herds and your flocks multiply, you get more cows, and you get more chickens, and you got your natural eggs, free-roaming egg kit, that you can eat now, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not against that. You can go to the store and buy it here. But I'm talking about in this context, when your herds and flocks multiply, and your silver and your gold are multiplied, you got your 401k, Trump is in office now, stocks are going up, man, we making it, the money's rolling in, we're living out here, we can buy whatever we want, we can do whatever we want. Man, you're in a dangerous place. And all that you have has been multiplied. When your heart is lifted up and you forget Yahweh, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage, who led you by carrying you. he carried you. The word led is not really correct. It means he carried you through that process. That great and terrible wilderness in which the fiery seraphs, which is a burning seraph of a copper color, serpents and scorpions and thirsty land where there was no water, who brought water for you out of the flinty, which is a hardened rock, which is symbolic of the Messiah Yahshua, okay, who fed you in the wilderness with manna, which is, that is whatness, what is that? Which your fathers did not know, that he might humble you. Here we go. The reason why you don't go out to the country to live in the house on the prairie or on the Caribbean island, the reason is because he's brought you out there because he wants to test you. That's why. And if you're running from the testing, you're not getting qualified. You're running from your calling, is what you're doing. And that's because there's fear inside of you that you have not yet come to recognize and that you do not want to acknowledge and you don't want to confront it because the fear of facing your fear is paralyzing you. But it's also killing you at the same time. That he might humble you, and here's the word, and the word humble you means this: to depress and browbeat down. That's what it means in the Hebrew. That he might test you to do you good in the end. See, it's hard in the beginning. Because in the beginning, your flesh is being afflicted. It's being told, you can no longer do this and you can no longer do that. What are you going to do? Are you going to freely say, I trust your judgment, that you only mean good for me? I may not see the good initially. I'm going to see pain and suffering. But if I hang in there, I'm going to see the good in the end. It's for my own well-being. That's what he's telling us. You either trust that or you don't trust it. You trust your own flesh or you trust what he's telling you. In the end, in the Hebrew it means for future prosperity. Not in the present. Not like the Christians do out there on Sunday. Put this $1,000 check in the basket, and I believe God is going to give you a $3,000 return on your money. This week, yeah, God told me, you put that $1,000 in there, somebody's going to come to your door this week, and they're going to give you a $3,000 blessing. You can take that to the bank. Well, he's going to be taking your check to the bank. And you ain't going to get no $3,000 blessing. And if you do get it, it's because the devil blessed you with that $3,000. Because you bit into the lie. Because you don't know what that man's all about and what kind of God he's serving. That false prosperity gospel. This prosperity, you can take this one to the bank. But you got to go through something first to get this. You got to be qualified. You got to go through a wilderness experience, not running out into the countryside. Then you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gained me this wealth. And you shall remember Yahweh, your Elohim, for it is he who gives power to you to get wealth, that he may establish his covenant that was a compact which was made by the passing between two pieces of flesh. Or to your fathers as this day. So my question is this at the end. Are you willing to be a prophet like Ezekiel, who even the rebellious house of Israel can say that you were amongst them? Are you willing to be a prophet like Ezekiel, where you can go and say, these people, I spoke to them, they didn't want to hear the words that Yahweh gave me to speak to them, but doggone it, they at least acknowledged that a prophet was there. Can you say that? If you can't say that, then you're still living in the same fear. And you haven't gotten to where you need to go. We all need to come to a place where we're like the Ezekiels. We need to come to the place like all the other prophets. We need to come to the place where we're like Yahshua, who's not afraid to go into the Jews' synagogue and tell them to their face exactly what the word of Yahweh says. So, let's not have the mentality of hibernation that's based on fear. Let's get away from this foolishness about living out in the country away from society where we're not doing the Father's will. Let's step up to the plate and let's do what the Father has called us to do. You only go around this life once. You don't get another chance at this. You're only going to get one shot at it. Your past does not have to equal your future. Your future is still yet to be defined by the choices that you make. Make the right choice. Go this way, live this way, and you will live and you will prosper eventually. So let's do that, and let's bless Yahweh. Let's close now. Abba, Father, we bless you and thank you for your word, Abba, that perfect love does cast out all fear. And we don't have to live in this fear, Abba. And we don't have to hibernate from this world. We are in your hands. We don't control our own destiny, except that what we give you the privilege and the honor of guiding our life in the way that we're in agreement with you. So help us, Abba. Help us to put away this foolishness about running to the country, running to the Caribbean islands, or any other part of this world to get away from society so that we don't have to do the Father's will, because we're so paranoid and so scared that the world is coming to an end and that the governments are collapsing and all this other stuff. This comes, Abba, because your people are perishing because they don't have a vision. And they need to have a vision. And I'm praying, Abba, that this word will go out today and will speak to people, that they get honest with themselves and realize, Abba, Father, that their destiny is wrapped up in your hands if they'll just trust in you and not fear what this world is trying to show them. Let them trust in you, Abba. Put the spirit of faith and confidence in your ability and not our ability to carry out your will for this world, so that we may have the peace of Jerusalem finally once and for all, Abba. In Yahshua's mighty name, amen.